Something that there's been quite a lot of discussion about recently is conversion therapy. Of course, the government is proposing that such practices be banned and criminalised in New Zealand, and I know a lot of people concerned about it. Aaron Ironside, who is the host of the Active Intelligence podcast, joins us on the program. Aaron, kia ora, good morning. This is something which, well, I've watched and engaged with the podcast that you've done on this topic. It is quite a complicated issue. There's certainly some concerning things in there. First up, what is conversion therapy?
Well, I think that becomes the starting point for why so many people are struggling with this, because it's unclear, according to the proposed bill, exactly what conversion therapy is. On one extreme end, conversion therapy is a coercive practice, particularly where parents might take teenagers against their will to some often religious practice designed to pray the gay away or do something draconian and quackery based in terms of the type of therapy, with air quotes, provided. And there's no doubt that that kind of conversion therapy should be outlawed. But unfortunately, the bill has now lumped in any attempt to talk to someone about their same-sex attraction or gender identity issues in a way that might lead them to pursue a lifestyle that is free of those impulses.
Certainly the extreme end of conversion therapy that you described, I think just about everybody would go, well, yeah, that's a bad thing. That's a terrible way to treat people. It's not good practice from a therapy point of view. It should be illegal. But is that happening in New Zealand?
Well, that's the thing. It just simply isn't. There's no evidence that any religious groups in this country have offered or do offer these extreme forms of conversion therapy. And an Official Information Act request revealed that our government officials have only received one informal complaint about this type of practice in the last 10 years. This law is virtue signalling, unfortunately. It's not really about addressing any real-life issues, which means that the fact that it seeks now to potentially criminalise parents and pastors is deeply concerning, because it isn't actually going to change anything about counselling, because these things don't happen in New Zealand.
From a worldview point of view, though, the Christian church, the evangelical Christian church, they're the bad guys in this scenario. That certainly there are parts of the world where these types of terrible things are happening, and it's often Christians that are involved with it. It kind of puts us in a bit of a defensive position from the startup.
Well, sadly, it's true that oftentimes it has been Christian groups, but let's be clear, we're not the only ones from a faith point of view that have declared a position on the topic. Islam has a similar position,
Yep.
and even the Dalai Lama has said that homosexuality is an aberration. So, three of the four major world religions
Yep.
have a very similar kind of position. But you're right, we're not in a good position to speak about it, because in so many ways we're the people, at least in some wide story internationally, are part of the reason that this is even a topic.
When it comes to the legislation as proposed, it is, it's past its first reading. There's a select committee. There'll be all sorts of people making submissions, and certainly people encouraged to do that. But what are the things most concerning to you about the legislation, the bill as it stands?
There are two things that we need to be very clear with our politicians need to be changed about this bill. One is the fact that this bill does not permit someone to seek counselling under their own steam. Consent is not considered an issue, and the logic that's often brought up on this is that it's akin to saying, well, people might want to drive drunk, but we don't let them. This law says even if you want to seek out counselling to address your same-sex attraction issues or your gender identity struggles, you're not allowed to. You must be gay. You must be transgender, is essentially the conclusion of the law, which, of course, flies in the face of the right to self-determination, to say, actually, if I want to be gay, that's fine, but if I don't want to be gay, that should be fine as well. And the other big one, of course, is that parents and pastors will be criminalised potentially going to jail for 3 to 5 years if they threw the book at them, for offering to pray for someone if you're a pastor, or if you're a parent, seeking to delay or inhibit the development of course of action. For example, a child who wants to start taking puberty blockers, the parent will not be in a position to say, honey, I don't think that's a good choice. Let's not do that right now. That would be a crime.
So this is for 12-year-olds. 12-year-olds who aren't allowed to make decisions about what goes in their lunchbox, essentially, will get to make huge decisions about what gender they are or what their sexual preference is. This is even before puberty. And their parents and the people that offer them support and guidance in their life could be criminalized by saying, are you sure you want to do that?
Exactly. And now the law would say, oh, yeah, but a health practitioner has to side with the child. It isn't just the parent versus the child. The doctor has to decide. But the doctor has to offer that advice in the context of knowing it's unlawful for a parent to oppose this. So a doctor, of course, has got an unconscious bias to support it, because who wants to fall foul of this law? We live in a world that means that it's very unlikely that a doctor is going to be brave enough to say, look, I'm sorry, that puberty blockers aren't what you need. You need to go and talk to a counsellor. It's very unlikely that a doctor would be brave enough to say that.
Because counselling in this scenario, if somebody's saying, hey, I think I'm the opposite gender, or I think I have same-sex attraction, for somebody to say, hey, let's talk about this, maybe you don't, that in itself would be criminalised.
That's right. It's even the exploration of it. Look, we understand that anything coercive is absolutely wrong.
Yeah.
But it's a parent's job to help their child navigate the world, to instill values and to give understanding. And look, we know that 12-year-olds are still getting confused about all kinds of things. Heck, they probably still think professional wrestling's real. We can't expect them to be able to make decisions going to change the direction of their life.
The other aspect of it, which does sound like hypocrisy, really, is the statement which says that anti-conversion therapy, you can convert one way, but it's impossible to convert the other way. That somebody can go from being heterosexual to homosexual, that's normal. But if somebody who's living a homosexual lifestyle says, hey, actually, I'd like to explore being heterosexual, that would be illegal.
Well, exactly. And of course, it comes with this implicit contradiction, because on the one hand, you're born that way if you're gay, but if you're transgender, of course, the opposite problem ensues, that you're born in the wrong body, so you're not born the way you're supposed to be. And so essentially, the rules of the game are whatever you want, as long as it's in the direction towards the rainbow community, you're allowed to. But you can't resist it. You can't decide to change it. Now, look, we understand that many counselling practices have not been effective, and this is part of the problem, is that there's not a huge track record. But there are many, many stories of people who've sought out counselling and who acknowledge these impulses are in them, but have decided this is not the life they want to live, and have managed to actually move their life in another direction.
What is also an increasing reality is there's a generation of confused young people that don't know whether they're Arthur or Martha or which way is up anymore. How do we as parents provide support for confused young people in a way which isn't coercive, which is understanding of their feelings, but is doing so with a motivation of love and support for what must be really difficult times in this world in which we live?
And it is important to note just how painful that struggle is. Whichever the struggle is, it is painful to look at yourself in any way and start to think, gosh, I think I might be different from other people.
Yeah.
Now, the difference is, of course, is that in the cultural sea change that's gone from one extreme to the other. On the one hand, it used to be that you'd be the victim of bullying and taunting, and that was wrong and that was unhelpful. But now the opposite is true. Now you're going to be applauded and celebrated for moving in this direction. And I think for parents is to recognize that there is a sort of a cultural applause and affirmation of this that is very enticing for young people. The young person who has felt different and excluded and isolated now, of course, has the possibility of being applauded and deemed a hero for coming out, for moving in this direction. And I think what we need to learn is that young people, like all of us, are craving to be seen, to be known, to be valued. And so we're going to have to work very hard to convey that value free from things like your sexual choices, to realize that value is far more intrinsic than the person you're attracted to.
When it comes to submissions for this bill, I mean, we're all in lockdown at the moment, so in some ways we've got some extra time on our hands, but it is difficult. Now, you're somebody who's studied a lot about this, you've talked to a lot of people, you've got some resources, you're making an informed decision, but I know there'll be a lot of people listening to this are saying, hey, look, I don't even understand the question. How can I make a informed submission into this complicated topic?
Yeah, well, you can visit websites like haveyoursay.nz to make a submission. Of course, there is a website that plays out these issues so you can understand them more fully, called freetolive.nz. Those are some good resources. Certainly, I'd encourage people to make the submissions because the submissions back up the research. The polling says that 81% of us believe that if you want to seek counselling and explore making changes away from a gay lifestyle, you should be free to do that. 81% of us don't think that a parent should be criminalised for providing that kind of guidance to their child. So we want to make sure that the submissions in terms of their number echo that sentiment, that this is an example of the government moving in a direction that is idealised. It's ideologically based. It's not based in reality, and we need them to pull the handbrake on this.
That web address you mentioned again, if people wanted to find out more information and I suppose make an informed submission, what was that again, Aaron?
freetolive.nz has pretty much all the information you need.
Well, we certainly appreciate the wisdom that you have brought to this topic. People can see the further discussion at the Active Intelligence podcast. Aaron, thank you so much for joining us.